Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Derek Vaughan. I'm the head of client propositions and markets for Valiantis. And with me today are our speakers, who I'll introduce shortly, and my colleague Anthony Radar, who will be helping me through the presentation this morning. I greatly appreciate you joining us today. Valiantis is a leader in global consulting and services. We're dedicated to the Atlassian suite. We accelerate business transformation by digitizing process and modernizing teamwork using the best agile tools and methods. We support our customers across the entire life cycle in their projects, and because teamwork requires more than just tools, we help our clients bridge the gap between their strategic practices and the tools such as SAFe, Lean Enterprise and ITIL. Over the past 15 years, we've helped in excess of 5,000 customers to achieve their desired business outcomes, to reduce the time to value through improved team collaboration. Just a bit of administration today. All participants will be on mute throughout the presentation. The event is being recorded, and we will provide you a copy of a link to that recording at the end of this session. We also have a survey at the end of the session, which is 3 short questions. We greatly appreciate your feedback to help shape future events. And lastly, if you have any questions, there is a question icon on your screen. And if you'd like to enter your question in there, we do have a Q&A session later on in the presentation where we will be taking a number of questions from the audience. This is our agenda today, so apologies for the slight delay in starting this morning. We're hoping that we can catch up with that time. We'll obviously go through the agenda, which we're doing now, and obviously the next session we'll be going through is a series of case studies from our presenters today. There's some really interesting topics, so I'm hoping you're going to find something within the conversations today. Next is there's going to be a panel question time. We've got a number of questions that people have already sent in, and we're going to be going through those with the panel. And then after that, we'll have we've opened up the question session on the chat today. And so if you could put your questions in, we'll pick a number of questions towards the end of the presentation and ask our team to answer them on your behalf. And lastly, we've got a few closing remarks at the end. So let's get moving. I say apologies for the slight delay. So our speakers today, we've got Avril Franklin-Stewart from System C. We've got Corey Johnson from Genomics England. Harvey Neve is joining us from Public Health England. And Tito Castillo is joining us from Agile Health Informatics. First up is Avril Franklin-Stewart, who from System C. So Avril has worked for over 20 years within and for the NHS. Avril manages both ISO 2001 security and ISO 9001 quality certification, and has recently successfully achieved ISO 27018 personal identifier information in the cloud. As a SAFe certified release trainer and product owner, Avril has implemented and coached hundreds of users through Jira and SAFe. So Avril, over to you. Anthony, if you want to pass controls over to Avril, and we'll go ahead.
Hello there. I'm just going to try and share my screen, everybody, and fingers crossed that it'll come across. Maybe if you can give me the nods up and just let me know that that's okay. So hi, and thank you for inviting me. I'm going to take a very quick look at the experience of delivering software effectively within the patient care arena, specifically to do with agile tools. So anybody who hasn't heard of us, we are System C and GraphNet Care Alliance, and we've been going for 37 years now in the UK. And at the moment, our focus is very much on connectivity within the healthcare and digital world. We operate in quite a large number of arenas here. You can see that down the right-hand side. In fact, the only area we don't actually directly support is GP systems, although we do integrate with them quite easily. Our Agile journey began in August 2014. It was quite sudden. We had a management buyback. The managers came in and they'd had an epiphany. They wanted us to move everything to the cloud. They wanted us to connect everything and be the connected care company. They also said stop doing waterfall and do Agile, not just any old Agile, but scaled Agile for that matter. And also let's just move to Atlassian tools. So, you know, as a person in the organization at the time, this did sound actually quite controversial because realistically at the time, moving to the cloud wasn't quite something that people felt ready for. Certainly the idea of restructuring the company, which also came as part of that message, had everybody's ears perked up. But let's just start with the top one here, which is move to the cloud, because in 2014, moving to the cloud was probably a bit of a different sort of proposition than we have now. Here's what people generally thought of the cloud, and I pulled these directly from Google. People saw it as kind of quite a risky business, fine for your messages or your photos to your mates or Netflix. But realistically, if you search what Google says of what people thought in 2014 of the cloud, this is the sort of thing that comes back. People saw the dangers rather than the opportunities. People were also very aware of hacking incidents that had gone on, quite high profile ones with even the very best of the cloud operators. So yeah, it was kind of perhaps not exactly the sort of place that people were considering for patient data. But nevertheless, our bosses were very keen on it and they started with us. They wanted us to be the change that our customers were going to experience. And what they did was started by taking out our own server rooms and moving our key services, core services, all up into the cloud. So the other thing they asked was to stop doing waterfall, which was happening still in various different formats, and to effectively move to Agile, but not just any Agile, this was scaled Agile framework. So this was effectively looking at a very formulaic approach to Agile, and it was also an external approach to Agile, which did appear to have quite a bit of weight behind it. Anybody can search this on the web. It's open to the public. Just search for Scaled Agile Framework for Enterprise and you'll see this. But what it says in short is that it's role-based, so everybody has a role and a set of responsibilities that go with it. It's a complete management system. There are processes within it that you follow, and in short it says you must plan in a certain way, that you will monitor as you go against KPIs, that there will be various feedback points whilst you're delivering, which will include frequent and often demonstrations of working software. So there's none of this waiting 2 or 3 months to see if it works. This is happening on bi-weekly basis. And also before you start your next planning increment, or PI, as they call it, there will be a stop point where you inspect and adapt and you try to do better next time. So for anybody who knows ISO or has had any ISO training, this mix of responsible staff and planning, doing, checking and acting is actually, in a nutshell, ISO 9001. So, you know, this was one way of baking in quality, but the other thing we were going to do was that restructuring of the business. We had previously been sort of 8 layers deep between CEOs and juniors, so we were going to collapse this down to fit Scaled Agile. This means dropping from 8 down to 4 layers deep between CEO and junior. It involved a massive training, which meant just about everybody in the business requiring training on Scaled Agile Framework and also the new Jira tools. But we did incentivize that. We offered industry standard certification, which also, you know, is one of those things that helps take the sting out of change for people. One of the interesting things that Scaled Agile Framework says is that Agile teams are great. Okay, but if you want to run an enterprise, what is important is the alignment and standardization. There's no way that you can have various different teams all geolocated around the country working with different terminology or different size of Lego bricks. If you're all working with the same Lego bricks rather than some of you on Duplo or some of you on Meccano, then basically you have the opportunity to roll off predictably various different conveyor belts all at the same time. This really began to see the benefits in March 2020 with obviously the COVID announcement of a lockdown. So the first thing that we noticed was that when this was announced and they said close your offices, we in fact just, that was a no-brainer for us. All of our key services, everything was already running in the cloud. In fact, the same day we were just running business as usual. We didn't even have to trigger our own business continuity where we would throttle what we allowed through the door just to deal with emergency cases. In fact, far from triggering business continuity, we were able to speed things up because suddenly our customers had new challenges. They needed more than the usual because they needed some new stuff delivering for COVID. So for our customers in the land of Careflow EPR, this meant a whole new set of biochemistry and hematology results coming through for the COVID antibodies. Anybody who's ever looked at results will know that they're entirely text-based and that they are text-based with different text for each laboratory. So we had maybe a 2-day learning period where we helped tune our systems to flag things as normal and abnormal, depending on the text for the new tests coming through from laboratories, and order them up in notifications for people who are interested in tracking that. But that really wasn't enough. Suddenly we also had sort of a different style of deployment within hospitals, people wanting results effectively in their hand. So these notification lists now needed to go onto devices that were traveling with our staff or with hospital staff. So we wanted a large list of notifications. We wanted to be able to swipe left or swipe right, check out whether things were positive or negative. So this became quite possible, and not only did we have the ability to give clinicians the hospital in their hand, perhaps it was several hospitals or several teams within their hand. Just so that you're aware, this is just test data, by the way, it is absolutely not real. So yeah, they had a large lists transferred successfully between the Careflow EPR and this is Careflow Connect, which is a handheld methodology for talking with your clients within the teams. And what this meant was it wasn't just the results, but the whole referral conversations were able to be put onto the handheld devices with, and although it sounds a little bit gimmicky, the ability to insert images and pictures, and a picture does paint 1,000 words. So the other thing that we noticed was internally, we were able to take multiple teams, multiple locations, multiple products, and move all of these different teams to deliver new features really very quickly. Because what Scaled Agile gives you is the ability to turn on a hat pin. Everybody is kind of drilled in their role and they know where they stand and they know how to turn things around extremely quickly. So changes could be built within a couple of days. Actually getting them live after site needing to test them might extend that to a couple of weeks, but it didn't mean that we weren't ready to go. And the Army does say you practice till you get it right, and then you practice till you don't get it wrong. And we had, by this point, had 4 years of working with Scaled Agile, so everybody knew what they had to do. But let's just take a little step back here, because there's dreams versus reality, because the big deployers here like Microsoft would still have you that people in scrubs are going to be working on laptops. Let's talk about that and infection control. How realistic is that? What we did find is that the feedback that was coming in from our customers was that they were quite grateful for the fact that we could transfer the hospital into their hand. So we were basically allowing them to have wipe clean, bring your own devices that they could sterilize with alcohol, which meant they didn't have to don and doff their PPE. So in the Nightingale scenario, you can run all of the elements successfully that you need to run your hospital effectively through a device like Careflow Connect. And this is all real-time and secure communications. And just highlighting the items at the bottom, that the security here is because nothing leaves the cloud. A device will be able to see the data in the cloud, but only while it's running. The minute it closes down or their application is closed, you are disconnected and there is nothing left on the device. There's also an issue here about not providing devices, because all of these elements are actually on a bring your own device. And again, you're enrolled in or you're kicked out. So all of these things began to make us think that perhaps the paperless future that we've been talking about for quite some time is going to come to fruition. NHS Digital has approved MS Azure. In fact, they did that a couple of years ago. They've also launched a cloud assessment program, which is fantastic. And this is built on the national cybersecurity controls. So those are embedded controls to make sure that the cloud that you're operating on is not the Wild West type cloud, but something that is secure and is suitable for putting patient data. And there's another way to look at those controls. They are also embedded within ISO 27018, which is the personal identifiable information in the cloud standard, and that's from ISO. Unfortunately for us, we've been working on that since last year, so Careflow Connect already has that certificate. They also have launched their Global Digital Exemplar program, which we're part of, and it is a truism, you know, medicine moves forward on the battlefield. Will this sort of, you know, brush with COVID and everything that happened and people not wanting to deal with paper records now actually push us forward towards this paperless future? Why shouldn't you have things like EOBs, you know, bed availability, clinical narratives, and population health in your hand? It is possible. This particular sort of example that I've talked about is available within our website at systemc.com. We have a number of case studies there that people can look at afterwards. But yeah, we've found that definitely COVID has pushed things forward and pushed people's thinking forward. And I'd just like to thank you really for listening to that and hand you back now to our wonderful hosts. And also just to remind you that if you've got any questions about this, to put them in the chat window. And I think I'll hand you back to Derek. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate that. Just going back to writing. So great. Thank you very much, Avril, for that presentation. Greatly appreciated. And also a good example of how agile tools and methods are being used in, you know, the current pandemic situation. So greatly appreciate that. I'm going to move over now. We're going to have Corey Johnson. So Corey is joining us from the Genomics England. Corey is a squad leader for ISO 13,485. He's an engineer in the quality team at Genomics England. His role is as a senior project manager, but he is also involved with technical design, software development, and business analysis. His current remit at Genomics England is to review all of their engineering practices, from software requirements to development and testing, such that the organisation can perform continuous delivery to the NHS. So Corey, I'm going to I'm doing the slides for you on this occasion, so if you let me know where you want to go next, hopefully everyone can see your slides on the screen now.
Great, thank you very much, Derek. So yeah, just once again, I'm Corey Johnson. I'm an engineering squad leader for our best practices at Genomics England. And today I'm just going to focus on a single case study. But before we go into it, if you just jump to the next slide, please. What is Genomics England? So the Department of Health commissioned Genomics England in 2013 to perform the 100,000 Genomes Project, which at the time was a research project. But as a result of its success, the NHS has commissioned Genomics England to perform all of the clinical whole genome sequencing for eligible rare inherited disorders, as well as eligible cancer clinical indications. So what Genomics England does is there's two components to the company. So there's the research environment, which is enabling third-party researchers, universities, institutions, etc., to perform genomic analysis on anonymized data. And then the clinical interpretation platform is the second half, which is the actual clinical pipeline that gets all the work that we do, from the receiving a sequence from Illumina, which does all of the wet lab sequencing. We only receive the data, and we're a complete software company where we annotate and prioritize the variants in the genome sequence and present clinically relevant results to the NHS genomic lab hubs. So within the platform, we have a bunch of front-end tools like Clinical Variant Arc, PanelApp, SIP API, and third parties. We also have pipelines, and we also have annotation and variant prioritization tools. So anything that involves genomics with respect to whole genome sequencing comes through Genomics England now. If you go to the next slide, please. All right, so the platform, as you can see here, is quite large. There's a large amount of distributed systems, and we're a monolithic process. So it means that everything has to come in at the top of a funnel and go all the way down until on the far right, you see the little white box where a GLH can see everything. So if you just keep clicking right, you'll see that on the first red box that's shown, if you click to the next slide, that this is the clinical interpretation. We get the clinical data coming through, and that comes from a clinician who is using a front-end tool that we've developed, and that will include the patient's information, such as the pedigree, what participants are affected in their family, if they have cancer, what kind of tumor they have, what was the date of diagnosis. And if you keep going, there's the genomic data. That's a separate pipeline because we received the samples through a plater, which then gets submitted to Illumina. So we have two distributed pipelines. And if you go to the next component, you'll see that we store it all in these results. And then the following component, click again. This is a whole presentation to the end user. So we kind of have three major pieces to our products, but we have a lot of distributed applications. But in the end, all of them talk to each other in a very linear format. Go to the next slide, please. So this is our mission. We just want to make clinical interpretation of genomic data. We also have a research mission. So if we go to the next slide, what we wanted to do is, since we have so many applications, we want to be very modular and try and make microservice. If we don't, we're going to have a very difficult time developing. So with that respect, it enables us to use agile methods. So go to the next slide, please. So we're going to focus today on Bertha, which is our workflow pipeline. That pipeline is everything from the genomic data intake to variant calling and annotation, which is basically checking that we can align the genome with reference genomes that have been sequenced multiple times to produce a valuable insight of what is considered rare. And then we prioritize those with a couple of ab initio algorithms using public databases, and then present a very small subset of variants, maybe 30, 40 out of the millions that people have, to the clinicians at the end, which we think may be causative of their disorder. Go to the next slide, please. So today we're going to talk about one particular item, which is taking research and development and putting it into production, which is a common facet for anyone in the scientific space. So we wanted to automate the ability to identify if the genomic data is equivalent to what is linked to the participant, because as you get the samples, there are two different pipelines, as I said. So what if there's a sample mismatch, or what happens if a sample's contaminated? Can you make sure that the participant or the patient that is linked to that sample is always correctly identified? And you can do that with genomic inference. So the story we have is, as a clinician, I want to make sure that the genomic data aligns with the pedigree entered and the samples submitted by the ordering trust prior to receiving the results. This is kind of an identity check. It's a fingerprint to make sure that, yes, these are the same person, so I'm not making a misinterpretation. Go to the next slide, please. So what we did is we did divide and conquer. We took the RD analysis team, we broke it into pieces. We then divided it into acceptance criteria that was logical, and then we documented all that logic in Confluence and peer reviewed it with our analysis and clinical teams. Let's go to the next slide. So in Confluence, we just wrote everything down. This sounds waterfally, but the whole idea was to get the scope of the module rather than just jumping in. Go to the next slide, please. And so we split it up into logic. That's all right, you can keep going forward. Then we separate into backlog items as a standard agile process, and then go again. So what's important is, from the last two items, we kind of filtered down the logic to be as critical as possible to development, reviewed that with the analysis team, and then we have to make everything traceable, because we want to, as Genomics England, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, which is MHRA, is the body that will approve if we can be an in vitro diagnostic medical device, or IVD. Since we're a clinical bioinformatic pipeline used in a clinical service, we are an IVD. We have a diagnostic tool, so we need to satisfy certain regulations. So we need very, very thorough traceability, risk assessment, best practices, which involve those ISO compliance components at below. So let's go to the next slide, please. So everything then in traceability has to be done. So we take the code as logical as possible. We then have truth sets, which is basically a set of data which we know to be correct from the analysis teams. We try and use anonymized genomic data, but we make sure it's accurate. And then from those traceabilities, we review them in our analysis teams and make SOPs based on the output, so that if we have any variations in production, they can be captured by operations. Go to the next slide, please. So this is the most important thing of Agile, is that we try and make the feedback loop as tight as possible. So we use continuous integration and continuous development for all of our fixture tests. So fixture is just the truth set of data. We review it using manual UAT, using a tool called Zephyr, which is it can be good and bad, but it's very useful for manual UAT. And so we keep this loop where we do tests, we do code, requirements, CI/CD, UAT, SOPs until the baseline feature is complete. We try and maintain a very tight circle where that whole circle is done in every sprint. So that's where the divide and conquer approach comes in. And therefore, our feedback is always continuous. We stagger our iteration over the sprints. And then once we have a product that's been well tested and system tested, it then gets released to production. So the next page. So how do we make sure that's correct? If you do use Jira, there's a very useful tool for linking code straight in when you do your commits into GitHub or GitLab. You can put the messages in the commits that state what ticket is flowing to it. So from the Confluence to Jira, there's links, and then from Jira to GitLab, there's links. And then from our testing, there's reports that link back to the Jira ticket. So we kind of always have what's been pulled, what's been merged, what's been broken, or what's been fixed. So the next one. And so just to be clear, it was really, we try and keep iterative process as much as possible, but the difficulty is you must have really good acceptance criteria, or feedback can be very loose and you're doing more exploratory software testing. But when you're trying to make a productionized component, the best thing you can do for yourself is to really have predefined truth set of data, so you have a really strong acceptance criteria. It's still not microservice. It's still a large monolithic pipeline. Microservices would benefit us in Agile, and we still want to automate most of the UAT so that our regression pack satisfies all of our UAT, and the analysts are just looking at the new features. The whole purpose of Agile within our organization is to reduce the length of time from the analysis requesting something and the analyst looking at it in production. And the best way we've done that is by making very small features, very modular, and having very quick turnaround times. And that's all I wanted to present. So thank you. Pass it back to Derek.
Thank you very much. I mean, that was really good. I mean, I'm really interested in this. Genomics obviously is a driving field within the healthcare space, and it's really really useful to understand, the rigor that you're putting around it. Great to hear. I mean, one of the key stories I always hear about Agile tools and methods is the story about how to reduce the time to do something, and this is, I mean, the key thing that we're all driving to. So thank you very much for that, Corey. I'm going to now go across to Harvey Neve from Public Health England. Harvey is the head of digital products and transformation at Public Health England and a specialist in leadership and change management, having held transformational leadership roles in both the private and public sectors. More recently, leading applications of new technologies and adoption of behavioural change required to realise the benefits of digital transformation. So, Anthony, can we pass over now to Harvey for his presentation?
Hi everyone, thanks. I'll just show my screen. Hopefully you've got my screen okay there.
That's great.
Great, cool, okie doke. So, well, thank you very much, Derek. Hi everyone. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour today, but I want to talk you through how we at Public Health England have used the Atlassian suite to help grow our adoption of Agile values, principles, and the associated ways of working there. And of course, the first thing I have to say is I'm about to claim credit for all of my team's hard work. We have a brilliant team supporting Atlassian here at PHE. And our other digital tools as well, and then we have an awesome wider digital team as well who do some great work. So when I joined PHE 3 years ago, no surprises, quite a traditional waterfall governance model there, as you'd expect. Some really good digital work already going on, some starting up, and then some areas of our business had not started. So the challenge was to pull that all together into a portfolio to encourage a greater awareness, if you like, and application of design thinking, whilst building capability and capacity of user-centered design. And to do that, as we enabled and accelerated the growth and the adoption of those sort of more agile ways of working that I talked about. But we needed to do all of that whilst we were retaining confidence and assurance from that more traditional core governance model, if you like. We needed to be able to speak out to the business. So the approach we took was to create quite a light touch PSO, and we called it a PSO, a Portfolio Support Office, because we wanted a different name from a PMO, a Program Management Office, that's signaling something different from Prince and Waterfall, but recognizing that Prince and Waterfall was still dominant within the business. So we were kind of creating a digital bubble, to coin a phrase of the day, but one which could speak out, as I said, to the rest of the corporate governance that it sat as part of. And so we were able to create those sort of static, backwards looking, usually out of date, of course, PDF reports that go in those board member packs that we're all familiar with. But then when I got into those meetings, I could flick to real-time reporting. As much of the reports that we had that we were submitting were automated and were therefore in real time. So I used our reporting, if you like, as a kind of agile Trojan horse, as you might say, and that was quite different. It was impressive to people, and people around those board tables could actually see things moving before their eyes, you know, as tickets were completed by the teams that were working elsewhere around the business. Risks and issues were updated in real time. We had our risks and issues log on a Kanban. And it intrigued those early adopters and those pioneers, and those are the kind of people who wanted to know more and get involved. And that helped us to create a kind of coalition of the willing, if you like. So those of you familiar with the Kotter model will recognize that as a key ingredient of change management. So I've had to heavily redact stuff here, of course, but just to show you the kind of templates that the teams created in Confluence. So you're looking here, if you imagine an A4 sheet of paper, if you like. So this is the top half. Much of this is automated, but you can see as a service here, the evaluation, digital health evaluation service. We called it a highlight report because that's a word that people recognize within, those old style governance routes. But you can see a lot of stuff being pulled through automatically here, and there would be status summaries coming through and being pulled against each one of the lines that you see in here. Sprint goals pulled through automatically, progress and actions again being pulled through automatically, as were financials. And you could put some projects had story points or burn down charts and the like put in here. The bottom half of that page there, key milestones being pulled through, and the risks and issues that were pulled through as well. So if you took one of those projects, those individual projects, products and service reports would then roll up alongside another 18 or 20 of these into a portfolio level report. So this is the top half. Bit more manual here, but the lead would fill in only 4 or 5 bullet points and a bit of narrative for each of these headings, and they'd pull through key dates and the like through from some of those other products and service reports, maybe showing interdependencies or key milestones that were upcoming. So again, blending the language between the new agile and the old established governance stuff. And then the bottom half of the report is much more granular, and there were click-throughs to each of the service reports. So anyone reading this could click through and have a look in any detail they liked, really, into the products and services and see what was really going on, which was great. So I'll just take you through how this sits in the wider governance quickly. People ask about terms of reference for meetings. We moved to a one-pager. And this is the kind of thing we do. It's harder to write a one-pager than it is to write, 5 or 10 pages of drivel that you often see in terms of reference. So this clearly shows the purpose and the outcomes of the meetings that were taking part in these governance routes, the inputs, the outputs, the kind of standing agenda items, the people who are going to be members of that, the scope, what's in and out of scope. So these are really useful. Happy to share those templates if anyone wants them. In the wider governance, on this slide, it's illustrative, but on the left-hand side of the kind of meetings, the governance processes, if you like, and on the right is the data information that flows through. So at the bottom there, you've got the individual product service teams, the board meetings, the scrum teams that are meeting, and they are creating those highlight and service reports. Those 18 to 20 highlights and service reports were all brought together and discussed at that portfolio meeting I just showed you the terms of reference for, and they help create that big overview portfolio report that I showed you first of all. That is taken to the digital senior management team, of which I was a member. That then feeds into our directorate senior leadership team, and we're part of Financial and Commercial Directorate, FCD. So you can see our portfolio report, digitals, joining a load of other scorecards that make up FCD. And then FCD is part of corporate. It joins all the other directorates, a large business, 5,500, 6,000 people in PHE. And that corporate reporting can be reaggregated or disaggregated and made into other reports. So you can see things being made into corporate reports there. The outcome of all of this was really good, and is really good in that we do have the ability, and we have multidisciplinary teams set up, able to work following those agile principles. So we have live products and developing products with Scrum teams, agile teams working fine. They have a minimum overhead of sort of manual old style reporting. Most of it is done in real time and using Jira and Confluence. But we do have therefore created this bubble which is expanding, and it is that waterfall interface, if you like. I call it my Prince API layer, and it gives me as a portfolio leader good visibility in real time of what is going on across the full portfolio, and it allows me to demonstrate that in both old terms and new terms with our stakeholders through the governance process, through our business with our senior teams. And that gives confidence in our governance arrangements and allows us to secure resources and finance, etc. So we like this. It's getting more and more liked within the business, and it has been shared as good practice across government as well, following a government audit that we had of this work. And as I said, it's being expanded across other teams and being used for a number of our core governance processes right across our business. And it links really well into that broader move that government, you may be aware, are looking at the Smarter Working programme, if you look it up on gov.uk. So it links very nicely into that, and it allows us to adopt more agile processes and ways of working, those values and principles across our business, and allows us to mature as a more modern, smarter working, agile place to work. That's it from me. So back to Derek. Thank you very much, everyone.
So thanks very much, Harvey. That was really interesting. I mean, it's great that we've seen now, obviously, System C, where it's been a total organizational transformation for them in their journey. We've seen also Genomics England, where it's been a sort of a key project, key area of work where you used Agile. And now, as you mentioned, Harvey, as you describe it, your bubble, a very good term at the moment, but where you created almost a bubble within the organization. And obviously now it's growing and expanding, and we'll pick that up. That's really interesting contrast to see how Agile is being deployed in different organizations. Talking about different organizations, we're now going to go across to our final speaker. So Tito Castillo is a Principal Enterprise Architect and Data Management Consultant with Agile Health Informatics, which he founded after 30 years experience in the development of IT and data management services in the biomedical research and clinical practice. He's an Associate Vice Chair for Standards with the British Computer Society, a special interest group on health and care, and a chartered IT professional. Tito, Anthony, if you'd like to hand over now control to Tito, and he'll take us through his presentation today.
Thank you very much, Derek. Can you see my screen okay?
Looking good, thanks.
Okay, fine. Well, you've stolen my thunder a little bit for my first slide, but my name's Tito Castillo, and I'm Principal Enterprise Architect and Data Management Consultant with a company named Agile Health Informatics, as Derek said. I formed it a couple of years ago after having had more than 30 years experience working in healthcare computing. But I started my working life as a medical physicist, specializing in software development. And I went on to gain experience across many areas of clinical practice and research. So to give you an example, in the NHS, I've worked in Barts Health, well, Barts in London, I should say, Guy's and St Thomas's, UCLH, Great Ormond Street, and even up in Newcastle in the Freeman Hospital. In academic research, I've worked with Cancer Research UK, the Medical Research Council, Wellcome Trust, the Institute of Child Health, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and the NIHR. I've spent some time with Bupa, as well as Atos, and even a short stint with the Ministry of Defence. So as Derek mentioned, I'm Associate Vice Chair for Standards with BCS Health and Care, Chartered IT Professional and FedIP Advanced Practitioner. So if I can just advance, there we go. So I'm interested in data governance, which I think of very much as the elephant in the room, and I'll try to justify that for you if I may. An example of what I mean can be seen in a report that was published by the National Audit Office only a few weeks ago. They described in it the result of a review of digital transformation in the NHS, and this report, unsurprisingly really, was quite scathing of the track record of digital transformation, saying that major technical challenges still exist relating to how to embed interoperability within systems in such a complex environment. They go on to point out that while interoperability is essential to the current plans, NHSX doesn't really have a time frame for achieving it. The report then goes on to highlight the need for public trust in the way that data is used. But somewhat surprisingly, you might think, there's no real mention of the importance of data quality, data management, or the need to improve data governance. So I think data governance can be quite a confusing term, so I should probably try and explain what I mean. I don't simply mean information governance as is commonly understood within the NHS, although this is certainly part of it. Data governance really involves the exercise of authority and control over the management of data assets, and this isn't really just a legal and regulatory reason. You do it to maximize the opportunity and to reduce the risk to your organization. So I think people are gradually starting to understand the importance of data governance. So I had a look at Google Trends. Now, I know this is a bit of a crude way of looking at it, but if you look over the past 15 years or so, what you see is there's been a gradual but steady correction, I would say, in the emphasis people have placed on the term interoperability, with the emergence of an understanding that data governance is actually becoming a far more important concept to consider. So there are actually quite a wide range of activities that fall within the scope of a mature data governance framework. And this is particularly the case for large, complex organizations that you might find in the NHS. What I've illustrated here is what's often known as the DAMA wheel. DAMA is the Data Management Association, and this is described in detail in their best practice guide, which is known as the Data Management Body of Knowledge, otherwise known as DMBOK. But in this context, in healthcare, I think actually there's an important activity that's missing from this DAMA wheel, and that's safety management. So I've actually proposed a slight refinement to the DAMA wheel, which I like to call Tito's comb. I think it must be all the lockdown and my hair growing so long. But I've made a couple of changes to the DAMA wheel. First, I've introduced safety management as an activity, which I mentioned a moment ago. But I also described 3 of the management activities as being cross-cutting. So they directly impact and influence all the other activities. And these you can see are safety management, quality management, and security management. Essentially, these are active management systems. You could think of it at least in that way. So what are management systems? Well, they're simply the way in which an organization manages aspects of its business in order to achieve some objective. In practice, there are already a set of standards that have been created for various aspects of management, and we've heard about some of them already. So in this context, I would suggest that for information security, you'd use ISO 27001. For data quality management, I'd suggest considering ISO 8000. And for clinical risk management, a combination of DCB 0129 and DCB 0160 from NHS Digital would be sensible. All of these management system standards provide you with a reference model to guide your implementation. And to implement them, you need to establish a shared organizational vision with defined goals and objectives. I think simplicity and clarity are key to allow staff and other stakeholders to work to these standards, and they have a built-in continuous adaptation and improvement cycle that includes a high degree of reflective practice so that you can constantly understand what's going well and what's gone badly. In essence, in order to implement a management system, an organization needs to be agile. So to conclude, I would simply say that to improve data governance is essential for the NHS. Best practice in doing this would include implementation of an integrated management system approach, and tools that support collaborative continuous improvement and reflective practice are needed. So that's my short talk finished. Thank you very much for listening. As other people have mentioned, any questions can be put in the chat box on the side, and I'll hand back to Derek. Thank you again.
Thanks very much, Tito. Greatly appreciate that. Again, another interesting view on how agile methods and tools can be used, and a very, very important area. I know lots of organisations within the healthcare space are looking at implementing new platforms, new clinical electronic patient platforms, and obviously data governance is a key important area when you're dealing with clinical information. So I greatly appreciate that, Tito, in that insight. As I say, the chat session, the question section is open. Please feel free. I've had a couple of questions come through so far, so greatly appreciate those. We'll hopefully pick those up in the Q&A. If we can't answer those, we'll make sure that we respond to you later on in the session. So thanks very much, Tito, for your time. So quickly, we're now going to move to the panel questions. So we've had a number of questions come in advance, and I'm just going to invite our speakers to share with us their thoughts around a couple of questions. So I'm going to start very topically off the back of obviously the discussion today in terms of the different approaches to Agile. The first question that we're going to ask our panel is about, what does Agile mean to you? Because I know there's been some very different presentations today. So I'm just going to start with asking Tito, just as you've obviously just finished your session, I'll put you on the spot quickly. What's your view? What does Agile mean to you? Hey, Tito.
Pardon me, I was on mute. Schoolboy error. So you may be surprised to know that although my company is called Agile Health Informatics, I'm not wedded to using the word Agile very often. But I think of Agile not so much as a strict methodology or framework. I prefer to focus on the ethos, where team dynamic really is centrally important. And I think probably the best reference I've found to guide you here, if you've come across the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, the author describes a 5-layer model, essentially of anti-patterns for team dynamics. And I think if you focus on getting your team right, bearing in mind the learnings from that, you're a long way towards getting an agile team. So the base layer of this model is trust, or lack of it. And so teams really need to trust each other. Otherwise, you really might as well pack up. You really need to focus on getting and establishing a team ethic of trust. Next, they need to feel able to challenge each other constructively with opposing views, so they can have proper constructive debate, so that teams can then move on to commit to a line of action. Even if they disagree, they know that their views have been aired, and then they can hold each other to account so that the team can collectively focus on a common goal. I think when you get these in place, and then you combine them with principles really from Deming, essentially, where Deming's plan, do, check, act cycle, and I know he talked about various other theories around systems, then I think that that's what I think of as agile. And it's probably worth bearing in mind that those people involved in what's called improvement science in in the NHS, they wouldn't actually call what they do agile, even though actually many of us, when you look at the way that they approach things, we would probably describe it as agile. So I think it's important not to get too hung up on the term itself, and to think more about the underlying philosophy.
Well, that's great. No, thanks, Tito, for that. And again, I mean, I echo that myself. Obviously, in the late 80s, early 90s, I was involved in Lean and Six Sigma in my earlier career. And the one thing I learned through that process is not to get too tied up with the terminology. And obviously, it's more the practice of it. And I think that's really emphasize through, the different approaches that we see. And I know, Harvey, your work within Public Health England has given a really different spin to me to Agile. Perhaps you want to talk to us about what your view about Agile, what does Agile mean?
Yeah, I mean, I concur with what Tito said, really. I mean, ultimately, I think it does all boil down to people, because companies are always people, and the empowerment of teams. So Agile, in its manifesto, is expressed as, a set of values and principles. And those values and principles can then help to define an approach, a methodology, whatever you want. But Agile isn't a methodology, but it will help you define and create a methodology for you. And it is about that empowerment. So it's interesting. Is it Lencioni, I think, is the model that Tito was saying, if you look it up, the 5 dysfunctions. And you think about the leadership, the role of the leader is there to empower and enable the team. They should be part of the team, not part of the governance. So it sort of links back to my presentation a bit. So there is a subtle difference. If you talk to the person in the street and say something is agile, they'll say it's quick to respond, and it's response rather than reaction, and all this kind of stuff. So it is about pace and timescales. It's about getting stuff in the hands of users quickly and learning and iterating, designing with users, not for them. Waterfall, you tend to go off, you do all the research, you find out you've got what you want, you'd spend ages delivering it and then go ta-da, and of course everything's moved on. So yeah, something being agile, nimble, quick, working with users, and a never-ending product. It just keeps iterating until it's of no more use, and then it's parked and gone. So that's agile for me, I think.
Thanks very much. I mean, I really like the emphasis around teams, because I would give on 2 points on that. Is just to add on top of both Tito and your comments, Harvey, is I think, it's about being teams, but I find, and it's in my blog post that I've just launched on the back of this presentation, is that it's about engaging with also other stakeholders like the end user as well. So that's the one thing I think Agile brings, is that engagement with a wider group of stakeholders through the process. And we've seen that from the System C presentation, so really great. Let's move on. Let's pick up another question. So the next question is, what have been the benefits for using Agile methods and tools, including any early quick wins? I mean, Corey, you had a really interesting presentation about how you're using that in Genomics England, in terms of the very specific use case you were talking about. Would you like to share with us then a couple of the sort of quick wins that you've achieved, or some of the wins that you've achieved from the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, definitely. So the biggest thing at Genomics England is that we have about 20 different applications which do communicate to each other. And so that's a very strongly coupled model, despite the fact that you're developing within every application uniquely. So you can define payloads which are standardized between them so that they always communicate, and you can use microservice architecture, but that's not always the best method of control. So what we found was, using the Agile method, we chose to the entire organization be on the same sprints, and the lockstep approach allowed us to map dependencies much better and make sure that everyone understood in the sprint planning before that the project owner, the product owners and the developers understood what was relating to each other, and we could map dependencies far better. We could map our development streams better, and we could isolate the critical path much easier. So despite us having a huge factory that's monolithic with multiple applications, we were able to identify components which would have the most effect if changed before another component, as well as describing how the whole teams work together. So when we do large project proposals or when we have product reviews with NHS, it's much easier to scope because we have a sprint lockstep. So I found that working in a 2-week cycle and everyone following that same 2-week cycle, it really benefits planning. It opens up dependencies. It's really simple to see if somebody puts something in scope or out of scope. There's less chaos. It does mean that some things are more concentrated, like the sprint planning days or the retros or anything, or the ceremonies, which I do recommend are very useful. But the benefits outweigh the costs, and I found that the best thing was that people knew if they were doing something in Sprint 1, the other team that they relied on would need to do something for Sprint 2, and there was a really strong coupling on that. So we actually were working really well in unison in that way.
That's great, Corey. I mean, I think, as you say, I mean, that's a really good use case, and it's good to see that the dependency management. And I think as we talked about the topic of teams, as we get more teams involved, having that sort of dependency management sort of baked into our overall approach really works. And as I say, it keeps, we understand when things are being delivered, so that gives that certainty around it. So that's really useful at a project level. I think what the other thing is maybe with System C, Avril, I mean, you've gone for a whole organization approach, which is amazing, firstly. What have been the benefits you found from using that whole organization approach, using agile methods and tools, Avril?
Yeah, that, I mean, very much picking up on what Corey has just said. I mean, obviously SAFe is just one flavor of agile, but we have picked out exactly the same things as Corey. You set up something which is effectively the heartbeat of an organization. Everybody on the same cadence, everybody planning together, everybody finding their dependencies together, and then moving forward, having found all of those issues and blockers very much in advance. SAFe is just one formula to do that, but it was very interesting that Corey was using the same terminology as us. So we also have that role of product owners, establishing dependencies, establishing cadence, and SAFe for us, the quick wins definitely were that we were taking an external sort of like work plan, as it was, and applying that to our business. I think it's quite hard when you've got lots and lots of successful teams already successful in their agile adoption. To say we're going to pick just yours and move to this can be quite tough for the other teams, but by using an external system like SAFe, it just felt that there was an awful lot of fairness in that. So yeah, that's how it worked for us anyway.
That's excellent. I mean, I suppose the overall benefits in terms of the organisation, I think in terms of the wins as we talked about, can obviously disseminate quite across the organisation. And I think that's probably, Avril, I wanted to pick you up in terms of the next question, because obviously you've gone from a whole organisation approach. So the next question was about what steps have been taken to communicate and educate the rest of the organisation around Agile. And obviously you've obviously had a massive experience across the whole of your organisation. So perhaps you can tell us a bit more about what you've done in terms of communicating and educating the rest of the organisation on Agile.
Yeah, I mean, so for us, this was very much, strangely, it works with ISO without you realizing it. So the principles of ISO is that, ISO adoption should be a top-down message. So that's how it worked for us. It was our leaders who wanted it to happen, who attended the courses and the training with our staff. Everybody bought in. It wasn't just a case of you do this, it was a case of we all did this together. And there was obviously several hundred of us to educate. So the training was really very important, and it could have been very expensive, but we did work down the principles of train the trainer. So we had multiple people, quite often the Release Agile, release train people, the train team was our release team, and they were the ones who were supposed to be monitoring and coaching and pushing along, and they did the train the trainer, and we ended up with a number of agile champions, and everybody was aligned in that respect. And I think really training is something that happens not just once, it has to keep happening again and again and again as new people come on board. So having it top down and then having a whole load of champions keeping it going in terms of momentum, I think was very important for us. I don't know what anybody else's experience as that has been.
I mean, does anyone else on the team in terms of sort of their trainer experience? I mean, and perhaps take a different view because of obviously the nature of the deployment. Maybe Harvey, from the way you've talked about your bubble and how you've grown it in a sort of small way. I mean, what's been your approach from an organisation like Public Health England and what you've been doing around that governance model? How have you been communicating and educating people?
Yeah, so I'm amazing hearing Avril. We were talking the other day, just hearing the scale and the ambition there from your business, having the most senior leaders, leading from the front, saying this is what we're doing, setting out that vision, the benefits of it, etc. That, again, I went on about the Kotter model, but creating that vision is kind of step one of that. So what I really liked in Avril's bit as well was be the change you want to see, and that kind of underpins the approach that we took within PA and are taking within PHE, because Agile, as we talked about, is kind of based on values and principles. So there's a lot of behavior. Values and principles underpin behavior. So what we've gone with, really big business, very complex business, is to seed a number of exemplar projects across our business so that we can get lots of people involved in those particular products or services that we're developing, and they can get used to the new names, like you're saying, product managers, delivery managers, user research, etc., etc. They can start to get have an experience around it, and a positive experience, we hope, whilst we do some familiarity and some training and development as we go, sort of on the job training as well as formal training, if you like, so that you take people on that awareness, sort of knowledge and skill building journey. And I think that the thing I'd also mention is the importance of creating the actual spaces for these people and teams to work in. So activity-based working and workspaces is really important, giving them the right tools, the new digital tools that we're all getting much more familiar with because of lockdown, but things like Atlassian Suite, Jira, Confluence, etc., and Service Desk and Office 365 and Teams and all that sort of stuff. These are the things that allow people to come together to create these multidisciplinary teams and actually work to collaborate and then ultimately to do their best work. So yeah, we've taken a blended approach because we weren't able to just do that kind of big bang, if you like.
No, that's great. I mean, it's interesting to, you get two different perspectives on it. Obviously, a large organisation like System C, taking it all on board on an enterprise level, and then obviously how you've grown it in a very specific and a very unique area in terms of governance. And it's been good to see how the communication and the education that goes with trainer, which is classic for all of us, has worked across the organisation and how it sort of goes to go on. I think that, I suppose that comes on to the next piece in terms of the next question that we've had in our discussion was basically like how you're planning to expand the use of Agile in the organisations. And I know you just mentioned there, Harvey, we've used it in a particular area, and again, Corey, coming back to the work at Genomics England, you've obviously got it in a very specific area of your business. But it'd be interesting, Corey, if you were able to give a bit more of a view on how, now that it's obviously proved successful for your organisation, what are the plans to sort of build on that success and to use it in other parts, and possibly, from some of the presentations today, different areas of the organisation, such as potentially governance or data management, etc., as we've discussed. So, Corey, what's the views on Genomics England? How is this going to be progressing?
Yep. So Agile itself, for us, we just define it as very fast feedback cycles. And so for our organization, we also want that fast feedback cycle in the entire organization up to the ELT. So we're adopting the Spotify model with squads and tribes and chapters. And so in summary, why we're doing that is because we want a large product vision, but we also want quality to be distributed amongst the teams, no one to work in silos. Because the problem with Agile is if you work in a small team with Agile, it's very difficult to make sure that quality standards or vision that is kind of like a high level thing outside of the Agile network is maintained. So you kind of need cross Agile teams, and that's where the squad, tribe, chapter model comes into in Spotify. So I highly recommend just a quick read on that. But in summary, you have tribes, which are kind of the set of squads that are related. You have chapters which go across tribes, which tell you maybe you have engineering best practices, maybe you have clinical safety, maybe you have regulatory policy, or maybe you have, procurement. And then you can have guilds, which are a suite of developers who all kind of share the same tools and improve on each other. And maybe they can work together. If, hey, I'm in this squad, but I found this neat little tool, I want to use it over here. Or a researcher says, I found this really cool paper, I think we should do a demo. So you get more cross collaboration in the Spotify model, but you also maintain vision in a product level. And so we're just implementing that at Genomics England. And so far, it's been quite successful because we've already developed 3 major needs we had across the organization, which we always knew was kind of an elephant in the room. One of them was, how do we make our engineering better if no one's really focusing on quality? Because everyone says they're too busy, they're just trying to get something through. Every team's trying to deliver functional first, and anyone who is doing quality means that they're slowing things down. So now instead, we just have a team that goes across all the squads, says, these are our standards, we're going to embed these into your team, we're training you guys to use those tools, and then it'll enable you to be faster. And then that chapter, which works across squads, would then work on another quality piece. So we're trying to embody the DevOps model and the Spotify model into the entire organization for not only cross-team collaboration, but also product vision. So Agile is just great because it allows you to mold and it allows teams to work together faster. It doesn't mean you have to work in isolated small teams that never share resources. So I think that's how we're doing it. And so far, it's been really beneficial.
That's great, Corey. I mean, again, it's really good to hear that obviously that team collaboration and just, you know, as we're all sort of a lot of us are still working virtually at the moment. It's fascinating to know that obviously, you know, those teams can still collaborate, and obviously there are platforms like Confluence, like Jira, that can help them sort of that cross collaboration. And it's really good that obviously within your organization, you're taking that and obviously you're using it on a much more wider basis. So it seems to have worked well for your organization. It'd be good to, I mean, I suppose coming back to you, Harvey, in terms of Public Health England, I mean, we talked about the sort of, you know, where you've taken it almost into the governance layer of the organisation, into the heart of the organisation. Now, are you now seeing, you know, the appetite to move it into other parts? And what plans are there within Public Health England to sort of use Agile more across the organisation and the other areas?
Yeah, I think it was interesting listening to Corey, because the videos on Spotify that you can get on YouTube were ones that I'd certainly referenced as well, and they're really worth a look up. There's 2 videos, you'll find them if you do, you know, Spotify Agile or whatever. I think with us, we went to governance because we needed governance of our portfolio. It was a multi-million-pound portfolio, and but we had to not stifle and starve of oxygen the sort of fledgling Agile capability, if you want to call it that, but it had to survive within this sort of wider environment, traditional environment, as we said. So it was about creating momentum and a movement, if you like, people called it, rather than maybe a huge program initiative, because we'd end up being the very thing that we're trying to stop if we just created an Agile program. You know, it's a real oxymoron on that one. So we're trying to get to that tipping point where the majority of people in an area or around a discipline want to work in a certain way, and then we enable that fully. And there's a kind of Venn diagram I talk about between leadership, you know, people in place, technology, if you like, all those things coming together to give you that digital transformation, as is often talked about. And we had, I recognize that stuff that Corey was talking about, sort of almost like matrix working and having communities of practice, we call them, which I think you'd probably call them it might be guilds or tribes, can't remember the exact one, but so we have, say, across our digital content designers, they work on multiple different platforms, they are multi-skills, they do move around across platforms. We used to have a platform strategy, and we changed that by bringing in Jira Service Desk and moving to a user strategy that then we deliver messages and communications to via the platform. So the user is primary, the platform is the delivery method, and it's a subtle change again. But by doing that, we start to influence all the teams that are feeding and working with those teams. And suddenly you end up with the majority of people working in a agile way, and you end up having a whole team, and then maybe a whole division, and then maybe a whole directorate becoming, you know, what we'd call digitally mature or something like that. So it's more of an osmotic evolutionary process to our transformation. And again, that sounds like an oxymoron, but it's to allow us to drive change whilst not sort of prodding the beehive too hard, if you like.
That's really good. I mean, I think it's, you know, evolution, revolution. I mean, we've seen obviously with System C, it was very much a revolution, and we've got two examples there: Public Health England, Genomics England, where it's been a sort of an evolution of agile in the organisations. Yeah, I mean, the Spotify model, I think, you know, there's some good reads out on that. We've got some good explanations on how that works in the organisation, and then pulling on different departments. But the thing I'll come back to is, I mean, on Tito's comment around what's agile, I think, you know, using some of the terminology may be quite disconcerting in the first instance for the audience, but obviously, you know, making it your own. I mean, I would always encourage organisations, as I've done through my period of work in the Lean Six Sigma, is you don't have to, you know, follow the complete language and the semantics of it. It's just make it your own in your organisation, and there's been many organisations that have adopted different methods and styles of deploying it in their organisation based on what it means to them. So that's been really useful. So I think there's been some very interesting comments in terms of, as we've gone from like, what does agile mean for you in terms of working with teams in all of the organisations. That's a theme I think we've heard. I think the benefits we talked around in terms of, you know, that dependency, as Corey talked about, is you know, how to manage the different the timings for different teams of managing the dependencies in there, and one of the key benefits in there. But obviously, in terms of the overall adoption of agile has gone through the organisation. You know, people are experiencing you know, the time to revenue or time to value that they've achieved through using agile tools and methods. And I know Corey also mentioned this when he talked about his case study, particularly in the use case they had. I mean, communications and education is a big thing. I mean, particularly as like System C, we're doing a fairly enterprise-wide implementation of agile and safe, but not necessarily, you know, everyone's flavour. But certainly there was the trainer element, and how the whole organisation becomes part of the onboarding process, etc. To obviously where Public Health England, where obviously you know, it's gone up through all the board members and not necessarily use the same language, but they're working in an agile way. Much more, and seeing that, and it's being slowly introduced. And I think as we see the expansion in organisations in terms of adding more teams on and growing organically across the organisation, which is very much the method that Agile has taken over the years, coming out of software engineering and now getting more involved in business teams. That's certainly something we've seen in the past. We're just going to come on. We've had a couple of questions that have come through from the audience, so I'm just going to quickly look through that list. So I think there was a question specifically that came up regards to your presentation, Corey, where someone has asked specifically around the types of integration. I'll just play that question. So Corey, the question came through is, when integrating with various third parties, how do you manage to integrate when tools used may be different? So I guess that you may be sharing these tools. So I suppose what it's saying, was obviously within Genomics England, or maybe across departments or across into other organisations that you're engaging with, and you mentioned the wider NHS, you may be integrating your tools. Is there any specific challenges, Corey, that you've had with integrating your agile tools between Genomics England and your customers and other stakeholders?
So when it comes to, I guess let's define tools, because I mean, there's the actual software, you know, the messaging between third-party applications, and then there's the tools used to do the work, to plan the work. So I'm not sure which one the question was for, so I'll answer both just so I can cover the bases. So with respect to planning, if we are using a third party, they have external access to our Jira instance, as well as Confluence, that we have a kind of like a stakeholder component. So we have, due to GDPR, we isolate their view to our products, but they are able to come in and work at the same cadence that we do for deliverables. So they work on the same sprints. they don't necessarily release on the same cadence that we do. They release maybe once a quarter, but we have 4 different environments. So we have a dev, a test, a stage, and a prod, and they have different cadences and different audiences. So they're able to deploy immediately to test at any time that they wish to integrate with. Stage has a different cadence. So we work on a sprint by sprint basis in the test environment. And once we have a stable release candidate, it's then promoted to stage. And everything we do in communication for tickets, UAT, tracking is all done through a shared Jira interface. I honestly think that's been the best move, because when you go to emails or when you go to tools that you're not tracking in a ticket format that you can share and comment on and trace to what they actually deliver, it's very challenging. We had a requirements document that we scoped out what was needed to be delivered by the first quarter for a third party, and without using Jira, we wouldn't have been able to break it up to see the progress. With respect to software tools, the actual payload and interfaces, we have 4 major interface components. We have something called Gel Report Models, which is written in Avro. It's one of the 3 big payload schema definers. There's Avro, there's protocol buffs. I can't remember the third one. But they're basically, you define the schema, you share the schema, everyone uses the library, which is public, and everyone builds off that. And that's a really useful tool for API integration. The other thing is we define contracts. So we have API contracts. So people have to say, I'm going to develop this. Then we say, great, write a contract. And then people pull as consumers from the contract to say, yes, that looks correct. And that benefits that you can have 2 teams developing, even though they don't have an API yet, they agree to an API spec and they can test from. That's in its infancy at Gel, but we do use it occasionally, and we do write schema specs on that. And then the last one is FHIR integration, FHIR. We use that with the LIMS systems of the NHS, and we set up a standard between the LIMS systems and ours, and we set up a FHIR protocol. I think that's all I can say. If there's any other information I'm willing to.
Yeah, no, that's really good, Corey. I mean, I like, I mean, obviously you're standards based, so obviously I know the NHS is driving more to industry standards, so FHIR and your interoperability. I don't know whether I should be using that word, given that Tito said that it's more about data governance, but obviously, you know, using FHIR to help integrate with the laboratory information systems between yourselves and the other organisations, the labs, and as you say, the contracts. That's an interesting concept. Obviously, you know, contract between organisations to get that integration, and then your other method, obviously, as you say, is obviously giving external audiences access to your systems, and obviously, you know, providing them that access so they can obviously work with you alongside you, but obviously still keep their own cadence of activities. So I think there's been several. You've obviously hit the nail on the head that it is, you know, using different approaches based on the audience and the stakeholder you're working with, and how you need to work with them and what level of information that needs to be done. So that's really good. I mean, greatly appreciate that you sharing that. Hopefully that answered the question for the member of the audience. There's just been one more question that's come in, which was about how do you manage agile teams. I'll quickly answer that. I mean, in terms of the kind of skills that are required to manage agile teams, I think, you know, there's no prescription at the moment, but what one of the big challenges that's happened, and obviously, you know, and the pandemic has helped that, is that your teams tend to be come from different parts of the organization, so they're not necessarily within your current sphere of working. So what comes with managing agile teams is obviously it's you know, there are different skill sets that come into play, and different types of personalities and behaviors based on the backgrounds and things like that. And I think one of the things that you know, it could be seen as that, you know, is to be able to sort of, you know, adapt your style. You know, you need to be more flexible in terms of your style as a manager. I suppose one of the things, I mean, you know, Harvey, you've obviously worked within Public Health England, and you've obviously looked at the governance, and that's very much a sort of a style when you go through governance. But what would be your thoughts in terms of the sort of the capabilities and the challenges of managing agile teams?
I mean, this gets me onto another passion of mine, so I'll keep it short. But management, you know, is about control. Leadership's about enabling, and with agile teams, with these kind of teams, you need to, you know, the whole premise of agility, the agile vision, values and principles, is about empowerment. And the more you try and command and control, the less empowerment people are going to have. So if you're just completely rule based, so yeah, Avril's just saying, you know, democratize decision making. It's absolutely right. Be clear on the vision, be clear on the standards, as we've all talked about, you know, and there will be rules within there, but empower people to do their best work. Give them the freedom to work in the way they want to work. Give them the tools, give them the space, trust, so that you get those rapid iterative cycles that Corey was talking about as well. And that is one of the biggest challenges. Didn't mention it today, but leaders who default to command and control can really hold up and block the move to those more smarter ways of working, as we call them, more agile ways of working, if you like. So leadership development is a big input for us as we become a much more agile business, if you want to use that phrase.
Sorry, I'm going to take myself, but that's great. And Avril, yeah, it'd be really good. I mean, Avril, again, going back to you've obviously taken an enterprise view on this in your organisation, and yeah, democratizing decision making. I'm going to get it out eventually, but yeah, I'd love to hear your view on you know how different it is for managing teams now in this organisation.
So, I mean, Scaled Agile Framework, the reason it's scalable is that the touch points and the results that drop out of the bottom are the same size. They're the same size, the same shape, the same color. They are Lego bricks. But all of the decisions about how things will be developed, or what the best way to do that is, or you know how to improve that set of code, those decisions have been democratized down. So going from 8 layers deep in management structure down to just 4, your decision making ability is speeded up. Can you imagine having to go through board after board of making decisions? To move those decisions right down to the people who are best skilled to do that, and to leave that with them, whether it's what workflow they choose to work with in Jira, or you know how they're gonna work as a small team. All of those decisions go down to the individual teams, the individual staff. And you know, people, although Scaled Agile Framework, when you look at it as a website, it looks extremely prescriptive. What hides behind that is the fact that everybody is empowered. They're able to make the decisions that they feel they need to make, and you know that has massive benefits actually for the staff. So it might feel formulaic, but actually the net result is that people feel like they're taken seriously. You know, we don't have a massive turnover in staff. We have, you know, the effect what we'd call boomerang staff, who leave us for a few months or a few weeks sometimes, and then come straight back when they've seen the outside world. So yeah, you know, for us and the agile journey, it might sound like it's all off formula, but actually, you know, people have been given an awful lot of power from it.
That's great. No, I mean, that's an excellent story. And yeah, I mean, there's got to be, you know, about the workforce, and it's fantastic to hear like an enterprise and how that's impacting and really empowering the workforce. So it's great news. So that's all the time we've got for questions now. So really thank very much to our presenters today. Greatly appreciate them. As part of presenting today, Valientis is making a donation to a charity of the presenter's choice. I'll quickly just go around each of our presenters, starting with Avril and then going on to Corey, Harvey and Tito, just to say thank you very much for your time, but also what charity will we be donating for on your behalf? Avril?
For me, that will be Age Concern, who were fantastic with my mother as she bounced in and out of hospital with dementia. So yeah, Age Concern for me, thank you.
Thank you very much, Avril. And Corey, who are we going to be donating to on your behalf?
We'll be donating to the British Heart Foundation. I have a long personal history with them, and I'm very happy that we get to support them further.
That's excellent. Thanks very much. And Harvey, who would we be donating for on your behalf?
Yeah, for me, thank you very much for offering this. It's great. There's a little charity up here called Building Self-Belief, and it works with young people, helping them, giving them support to build self-belief, so that they've got the best possible start as they embark on sort of adult life. They talk about building stronger communities through building self-belief. So I'd like it to go there. Thank you very much.
That's terrific. Thanks, Harvey. And Tito, who are we going to be donating to on your behalf?
Well, thank you. Well, for me, it would be Crohn's and Colitis UK. It's an often forgotten group of patients, and I think they desperately need support. I worked in gastroenterology at the beginning of my career, and I think it's an important charity.
Thank you very much for that, Tito, and all of our panelists, speakers. Greatly appreciate your support on the event today. Just gives me time to sort of close out. Just to let you know, we'll be emailing out to the attendees today a recording of this event, and also a link to our blog post. As we say, as you close out the presentation today, there is a short questionnaire. We are interested in your feedback. If you've got any further questions around agile methods and tools, obviously please feel free to include those. Also, happy to understand if you'd like to recommend this event to a colleague. Obviously we can share that recording with them, so I'm very keen to understand whether you've liked the event today and would recommend it to a colleague. And lastly, we'd be interested to hear what agile topics you would like to hear about in the future in terms of developing events like this going forward. So greatly appreciate everyone's time today. So thank you very much for your time. Thanks again to our speakers. Thank you for all attending today. Greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to talking to you again in the future. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.